We've got some brand new leaks for the Siege of Paris, including map locations, weapons, and new stealth info thanks to our insider man Pedder. So spoiler alert inbound folks, and all of this info has been found directly in the game file, so it's all subject to change. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't get your salt shaker ready, but perhaps use a little bit less this time, as these are all the leaks that Pedder found in the game files in the lead up to the Wrath of the Druids, and they all ended up being bang on the money. First up though, big shout out to Rishab, who put together this amazing website for the channel. This isn't a promotion by the way, I actually paid him, but I just wanted to say a thank you in this video. It looks absolutely fantastic, and if you're on the hunt for a web designer, I couldn't honestly recommend someone more. So I've popped his contact details down below, and cheers again mate. So kicking number 10 off with some new skills and abilities. First up we've got Eowyn's Heart, which actually allows us to passively regenerate recent health loss after a delay. But then we've also got the Thrill of War, and I actually quite like the sound of this one because it allows us to gain adrenaline as long as we remain in combat, which is excellent if you're a bloodthirsty Viking or on a bit of a rampage. And if we combine that one with the Wolf Warrior, so this allows us to increase our damage the lower our health, which to be honest I'm not actually a massive fan of, but there we are. So we've got a couple cool stealth ability options here. The first one being attach an explosive to an enemy that detonates after a short delay, which I can definitely get behind. And if we also combine that one with the Ghoul Breath, it's a deadly poison arrow which makes enemies unwell, so it's not reinventing the wheel here, but it's an interesting addition. And actually when you do upgrade it, the poison cloud does vanish as well. But probably my favourite out of all of these, and it's the Plague of Rats ability. So we're going to be able to coat an arrow with rat bait that attracts a swarm of rats, and I can actually see us picking up this ability in the sewers, which is a location which has also been found by Pedder in the game files, which is how I reckon we're going to gain access to the city and pick up this particular ability. Either way, some of these sound great and I'm up for giving them a whirl. Now at number 9, and this is a fantastic find and I just had to include it in here, and that is cheese throwing and pig racing in Paris. And it does seem like we're going to be participating in these events dotted around the country, and in particular for the pig racing it looks like we'll be completely smashed on booze, which is standard, and then either bet or race ourselves against some pigs. Now I couldn't actually find anything historical about this, but there is a few towns in France who do seem to put on pig festivals with pig racing involved for fun, so perhaps that is a little Easter egg there. Now we also get cheese throwing, and it seems that we're going to be able to lob 2 blocks of horrible cheese past this in-game green banner at a feast to then win. Now when I heard this I was expecting something a little like what we've got in Gloucester in the UK, where there's a very famous cheese rolling competition where you actually lob some cheese down the hill and the first person to get it wins it. Now that doesn't seem to be the case here, as much as I would prefer that. However, we are lobbing a cheese to win some sort of reward, and it could be a little bit of fun, so viva la cheese. Now it looks like we're going to be picking up another legendary animal here in Paris, which is great in my opinion because I'm quite a fan of these encounters. It breaks up the game quite nicely, and I just wish they were a little bit more harder. But just like with the Wrath of the Druids DLC, where Pedder whipped out his crystal ball and told us we'd be picking up a boar encounter, he's done the exact same thing here, and he's found a barn bull this time. Now this one seems to be called the Ghost Auroch, and it seems that we'll have to deliver it to the tanner to receive a trophy, so perhaps another addition to our stuffed animal head trophies in Ravensthorpe. Pedder also hasn't found any more as of yet, but I do think when it comes to these DLCs we'll follow that trend of Ireland where we just pick up 1 per expansion. Bit of a shame, but hopefully this encounter will be a little bit more challenging, as I kind of steamrolled that boar in about 10 seconds in Ireland. So when it comes to armor and weapons, there's quite a lot of these assets which have actually been preloaded to the game files already. We've actually got ourselves some Ulfbert swords, which are the trademark swords coming in from West Francia at the time. They had that Ulfbert inscription on the blade as a sign of superior quality, which you can actually already see on the Carolingian sword in game, so cheers for the heads up for that one, Pedder. We also have 2 scythe weapons mentioned in the game files, one being the Wretched and the second being the Revolt Scythe, which was widely used by peasants at the time as kind of accessible weapons. And there seems to be a lot of short swords and ring swords named in the game files, and the ring sword being the type of design that you can actually see Basim equipping, which was very promising. And we've actually got 2 new weapons of notable importance named here as well. First we have the ring sword, which belonged to Louis the Younger, who was the King of Saxony, and he was actually the older brother of Charles the Fat, which sounds great. And perhaps most excitingly, we have a sword found in the game files called the Joys. It's the legendary sword owned by Charlemagne, forged from the same metal as Roland's Durandal, and it actually exists, so it was used to crown real life monarchs from the 13th century onwards, and it's now currently on display in the Louvre, so I would really love this as a one-hander in the game. And speaking of a one-handed bonus, Billy at BPR Gaming, who's part of the Mentors Guild, he creates some really awesome content on his channel, by the way, link below, but he recently said on Twitter that we'll be picking up some exclusive weapons designed by the guild in August. So one-handed swords arriving in August, I think this is looking pretty good, folks. Now in at number 6, and that's Cavalry, which we did discuss in the previous 10 things to know about Siege video, but it does seem that this actually is going to be playing quite a decent role in the expansion. So Jose, the post-launch producer, did mention that we'll be fighting the elite units of Charles the Fat, and at the time, those were knights and highly trained men on horseback. So Ped has actually found us some really interesting info, one of them involving a cavalry ram attack. Now, I don't want to get too excited here, and I know I need to manage my own expectations, but when I read cavalry ram attack, I'm thinking Rohirrim outside Minas Tirith on Pelennor Fields. Even if it is the Frankish cavalry charging me down in game, I'm completely cool with that. We just need an awesome shield wall animation now. But it also seems that we can actually stun the cavalry, which does make me think that the NPCs don't just automatically jump off their horse when they enter combat, which would be absolutely fantastic. And there also seems to be a distinct difference in light and heavy cavalry, which has been located in the sound files, as well as an AI fight style intended to circle targets while on horseback. So I'm thinking, what business does a Viking have in the Riddermark? In any case, I think an improvement on horse mechanics is something which a lot of people have been requesting for a while, and this could either be awesome or more of the same. So I'm excited to see what happens. By the way, if you've picked up any value or learned anything new from the video so far, then a quick like down below would be very kind and very helpful. So thanks very much. So in at number 5, and that's Zealots, and it seems like they're making a bit of a reappearance here in France. And if we take a look at the game file references from Pedder, it looks like these Zealots are potentially the order members we'll be picking up in Francia, and they seem to be part of a group who call themselves the Bellatore Dei, which is described in the game files as being a group of religious zealots. So it also goes on to say that the Bellatores Dei were intent on casting the devil out of Francia, one exorcism at a time. Now, I love a bit of speculative chat, as you well know. It's good fun, but at this stage, I don't think we can conclusively deduce that these folks are the Order of the Ancients cult in France. But from this info, it does seem plausible. However, saying that, Pedder does reckon that these zealots won't be roaming or hunting us per se, but rather static targets corrupting the land with their religious ideals in specific areas. If this is indeed the case, I can see a clue location system here, as we've seen previously, and perhaps the zealots are indeed the actual placeholders in the game files for the order members. Either way, interesting stuff. Now, speaking of interesting stuff, and that is historical figures, and Jose went on to say that in this expansion we'll be exploring war-torn Francia as we encounter historical figures, and we spoke about a few of them in the previous 10 things to know about the siege video, so go check that out for a little bit more context on Count Odo, Charles the Fat and Rollo, as they've all been named in the game files so far. Saying that though, Pedder's worked his magic and managed to find another name of interest to us that stood out historically in that time period, and that person is named Queen Richardess, which I'm sure I've pronounced incorrectly, classic, but she was actually Charles the Fat's wife, who was very well known for her piety, devotion to just rule, and her kindness. Now, her legend goes on to say that she actually found a mother bear grieving over her dead cub, and after holding it, she returned it to life. Now, both of these bears ended up being devoted to the Queen for the rest of their lives, and guess what? It looks like we pick up a bear mount in the game files, and with the recent Lynx and Lion mount additions, I don't think this is a big stretch, to be honest. So if you've ever wanted to ride a bear into battle during a siege, then this is your time to shine, I reckon. Now in at number 3, and we've got ourselves a few black box references here, which does sound very ominous and intriguing, and this is actually what it's being called in the game files, and Pedder thinks there's some sort of mechanic here with predefined areas and entities which potentially contain assassination targets. Now this would make a lot of sense with what we've actually recently picked up in Ireland in regard to bonus missions such as the King's Pleas and additional stealth options for extra trade rewards. However, it seems at this stage that they are elaborating on that mechanic a little bit more here, which I know some of you will like the sound of, and which we kind of already saw a little bit in London regarding a few of those missions. But what we have here is a distrust zone which we need to enter, but more importantly we need to enter that zone and we have to be cloaked. And as we actually travel through this zone, we'll enter the red zone, which is the very hostile zone with our hood up, and then finally we'll enter this black box zone, which is where the event begins and where we'll have to partake in this assassination event. Now this may sound like your kind of run-of-the-mill stuff, but for some old school fans, this is the nitty-gritty social stealth assassination events that did earn the franchise such renown and love, and actually seeing more of this in the game files this early is a really great sign in my opinion. So fingers crossed for a lot more of this coming into Paris. Now in at number 2, and that is Rebel missions, and I'm going to say it now, and I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about these in the next few months. So Pedder's called shotgun because he says there's huge amounts of game file info referencing Rebels in terms of quests, factions, upgrades and rewards, and it all seems to indicate that we'll be working with the Rebels to upgrade our siege equipment, raise our infamy in the area and earn rewards in doing so. So it's a similar format to that in Ireland, where we increased our reputation with Dublin via the trading mechanic, which subsequently netted us a lot of armor sets and weapons weapons. And it looks like this is going to be the same mechanic here in the DLC. What's particularly exciting though is it genuinely seems like we're going to be able to upgrade archers, swordsmen, spearmen, and the size of our raiding party by completing these rebel missions in and around Paris. Now, I know this isn't Total War or Crusader Kings kind of level of detail here. Let's not overextend ourselves, but if this data is anything to go by, it does seem that we're going to be actively taking a role in managing and upgrading the siege equipment here outside Paris. Now, in terms of rewards from rebel missions, what we do have named in the game files at the moment is 6 tattoo sets and 3 different armor sets, including the Bellatore robe, the Reaper set, and the Wayland armor set. And Peda tells me that there's actually more armor sets inbound for the mastery challenges, so of course we're going to be doing a video on that just to get a little bit more info on it. So if you're interested, make sure you hit the notification bell to be the first one to know what that's all about. Now, in at number 1, and that is locations in the DLC, and Peda has managed to pull those location names from the game files just like he did with the Raft of the Druids, and to be honest with you, we nearly got it bang on. But saying that, folks, this isn't set in stone and it may actually turn out to be complete rubbish, but these locations have appeared in the files and I've had great fun whipping up a potential map for you. So of course it's not to scale, but it should give you a better idea of what we're dealing with in terms of names noted in the files. So let's just get a map up of France right now and how it looks right now, and this is what it looked like approximately around the time period where the Siege of Paris took place, give or take. And if I just go ahead and add in the blue section here, this is where we think the siege will be taking place and the kind of world map that we'll have access to in the DLC. Also, just like my Irish, by the way, my French is something to be desired, so apologies in advance to all of my French friends for butchering your lovely language. Je suis désolé. So anyway, let's get started with Paris, the capital, and then we have Saclay, Melun, Provence, Saint-Geneviève, Champlain, Soissons, Molviette, Amiens, and Bologna. Now we also have a location called Evresin, which was the name used at the time for Normandy, so let's pop that in as well. And running from the coast down to Paris, we have the River Seine, including more locations named along the river, starting with Lisieux, Marais-Vinaire, Beaumenil, Pont-l'Arche, Évreux, Le Ville-Évreux. And I think that's it for the French names, and as you can tell, I'm quite the linguist. This isn't to scale, like I said. I reckon it's going to be squashed up a little bit, just like Ireland for the most part, but it seems to all coincide quite nicely with one another. And also, there's an interesting location mentioned inside the Parisian walls, but in particular, the Lutetia Bureau, Lutetia being the word the Romans used to name Paris when they were in that neck of the woods, so it looks like we'll be visiting another Hidden Ones Bureau in Paris, which is very exciting. Now, if you're looking to join a growing community who enjoys AC as well as everything not AC, then consider checking out our Discord server. We really do have a great set of people here, and it would be awesome to see you in the lobby. Also, big congrats to Yusuf, who won our photo competition last week. We actually have photo competitions every week, so come and share your photos with everyone. And of course, I just want to say a big thanks again to Peda, who's put in an incredible shift. First class work again, mate. Thank you very much from all of us, and I think that's going to do it from me, so I'm sure I'll catch you in the next video, and as usual, coffee's on me.